Hello, my name is George Boring, and today I'll be talking to you about the ethics of criminals, including ethical explanations of crime. So first off, when learning about ethics, we have to know what ethical thinking is. And ethical thinking is like normally what's morally right or wrong. And it can be broken down into like 3 questions to help yourself to know if something is ethical or not. First question you can ask yourself is the act in accord to any moral virtue? The second you can ask is, would it have made a good universal rule? Also, you can ask, was it pursuing the greatest total happiness? Was it like was it weighing potential pain and pleasure in the act that you were committing? So ethical thinking can be used to avoid a lot of criminal consequences. And one big example that we learned about in the text is the kid that dropped the cement block off of the overpass. It hit a car and it went through the windshield and it ended up killing the driver. Now, he obviously in the situation wasn't weighing all of these 3 questions, or he wouldn't have committed the act, because there's no moral good to that. All you're doing is dropping a block off of an overpass. So another example of this could be the abuse on prisoners in the Iraq prison that was owned by the United States. So the U.S. military in this prison, they would keep prisoners naked in darkness, and the male prisoners were forced to wear female underwear. So obviously this has no moral virtue. There's no good that's coming from this. It's not going to pursue a great total happiness. They obviously didn't weigh the potential pain and pleasure. So the application of individual ethics may have prevented all of this criminal behavior. And the big thing in society nowadays is you hear a lot of people say, don't sweat the small stuff. It doesn't matter, it's small. But this justifies unethical conduct and sometimes even criminal conduct. Examples of this could be stealing little newspapers, disabling parking meters so you don't have to pay for them, or even sometimes eating food at the grocery store and then not telling anyone and not paying for it. All this is unethical. So these defining choices and defining them as the small stuff makes it hard to determine between what is morally right and what is morally wrong, or between moral and immoral conduct. So criminals often have this mindset, which is not a good thing, and they rationalize their choices by minimizing the rights and interest of the victims. So for instance, in the grocery store circumstance, the criminal who's going to eat the food and not pay for it isn't thinking about the victim and his family and how they're losing money. So criminals and non-criminals often have the mindset of looking out for their own best interest. This means that they kind of turn their own selfishness into self-gratification. So they don't really care about anyone else. They're thinking, what's going to make them happy? What's going to make me happy? And I don't care what happens to anyone else. So an example of this could be someone who steals, and they kind of see the person that they're stealing from as a threat to their self-gratification. They don't care that they're stealing from you because you're in the way of what's going to make them morally happy. All right. And so in crime, it's difficult to have just one universal explanation for all of crime. There's so many different types of crime. It's unique. So researchers have kind of grouped crime into 4 different types. Those 4 different types are going to be classical, positivistic, structural, and ethical. And so I'll list off the causes for these crimes. So for classical crimes, the cause of it is going to be the free will of choice and trying to maximize the pleasure and pain. And trying to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. So what they're doing is they're kind of going on their own free will. They're saying, I don't care. I'm going to maximize whatever makes me happy, whatever's good for me. And they don't really care about the pain. It minimizes it for themselves because they're making themselves happy, no matter if it's committing a crime or not. This could be shoplifting. You see a pair of sneakers, you want, I'm going to go steal it because it's going to make me happy and it's going to minimize my pain. All right. The second is the positivistic. And that is the internal or external factors such as biological, psychological, social, and economic factors. And So these are all causes for crime because some people can be born into situations that they can't help. Like you could be in an economical situation where you don't have money for food, and so you don't want to starve, so you're going to go steal some bread from a grocery store. It still is morally wrong, but there's different factors that play into the commitment of crime. Your psychological. You could have your parents always telling you, hey, take this, take that. They're kind of feeding that into your mind. So your mind, your psychological aspect of it, you're just kind of thinking like, I got to commit this crime. Another one is going to be the structural concept. And that's the causes for crime would be political and economical conditions that provoke the culture of competitive individualism. So individual gain is going to be more important than the social gain. An individual gain is more important than the social good. So you're not really thinking for your community or whatever. You have all these little conditions that are going to provoke your competitiveness, and you're thinking out for yourself only. So this could be, I don't know, stealing is just a really good example of it because it falls into that. You could be in a bad economical condition, and so you got to get competitive. You see someone else down the street that has these new pair of shoes. Okay, I'm going to go take those shoes so that we can kind of compete, and you couldn't really afford them, so you're going to commit the crime instead. Lastly, ethical. So this is that the free will of choice is influenced by ethical principles. So basically, illegal conduct doesn't bring pleasure because they would feel bad for the victim, but that's not what they're thinking. They have the failure in this decision making. They don't appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct that they're committing. And they don't care about the community or the victim, and they're just committing crimes without any ethical value. They're not thinking before they act. This goes back to the example of the guy dropping off the block over the overpass. He's not thinking. Anyone who's thinking ethically is going to think, oh, what could happen to the victim or the community is that I could accidentally kill someone. I could cause a big pile up, a wreck. They're not thinking of that when they act. They're not thinking, that's what it is. They're kind of just acting without thinking about any ethical values whatsoever. And this goes back to that a lot of people aren't taught ethical values in school. And so they're not educated on it young. Their thought process doesn't think to consider the greater good for the community and for other people and for the social status. They just kind of don't think and they act. So yeah, that was my overview of the ethics of criminals and the ethic explanations of crime. Thank you.